So it's funny, years ago, how if you were a board gamer, before board gaming went mainstream, if you tried to explain this hobby, this interest, this passion with someone else, they would look at you kind of strange. And now I find within the board gaming community, if you were to explain that you are a solo gamer, that you consider solo board gaming not only a viable option, but a completely legitimate way to play board games, it seems to get you a similar kind of interesting look on here. So is this something that is going to evolve, or is this a subcurrent of gaming? Now, for myself, I'm kind of polarized in two camps. I play board games as a way to have some awesome social interaction, have a lot of fun, roll some dice, see some cool stuff happen. That's one of the reasons why I love playing Zombicide Black Plague. Just massive zombies, massive craziness, working together as a team. Joey, it's usually you. You don't listen. We warn you not to do it. We tell you we're going to leave you behind. You get killed. You get upset. Rinse and repeat every single time. It's a lot of fun. And then on the opposite side, enjoying a game, probably because this is pulling from my role-playing roots, of really trying to immerse myself into the game, trying to get down to that board level of the game and see myself as an avatar playing it. And from that perspective, I really enjoy playing solo. Now, some games, they're set up co-op, or some games you have, Dark Souls is a great example. It's the players versus the engine, versus the cards of the game. The game really doesn't care if it's one player controlling all four heroes or four people playing on there. It's a similar experience. Then you have games perhaps like Descent, where the Overlord can be automated, second edition, and there's even solo variants to play that, where a dungeon is randomly generated. And then there's some games that one player versus the party, or games with possibly hidden information. Example, I'm thinking Claustrophobia, a really amazing game, or Conan the board game. The Book of Skelos is an Overlord controlled. The minions are controlled by the Overlord. You could kind of solo it. I've got some interesting rules for it, but certainly the game is meant to be played one versus many, or 4 or 5 players on there as a team. So my thought and my experience is kind of this: the advantages of solo gaming, the disadvantages of solo gaming, and I would love to hear in the comments your opinion on it. The first number one advantage that I find: there are no other players to ruin the experience. Now, most of the time, I think for many of us, whether we're part of a bigger board gaming group, maybe at a hobby store or a club or something like that, or just kind of a social group, you do tend to play with the same players over and over again. But occasionally new players will come into your group. And personally, I will never turn anyone away from the board gaming hobby. I'm a firm believer in that. If you're at the table, if you want to play, we're going to make this happen. We're going to do it. Sometimes even if I have to step out and not play the game, I'll demo it, I'll run the rules, we'll do whatever. But I find that opens things up. Or if you're part of a group where you're going to randomly play, right? You've got your game tucked under, you show up on Thursday to play at the hobby store, you don't really know what you're going to play with or who you're going to play with. I've had many, many games ruined because the player personalities didn't work. Either their expectation of the game was different, or they were just going off doing their own thing. And there's been a number of downright just kind of weird scenarios playing. Now, I could equally point out, Fritz, that happens in role-playing, that happens in wargaming. My counter is in wargaming, not so much. Because in wargaming, while you have the occasional power player, what you see happening a lot in wargaming is it's maximum commitment. You have to buy an army, you have to paint an army, you've got to show up with some terrain, you've got to learn some rules that are a little bit more complex. On average, one could counter and say something like Twilight Imperium is more complex than any wargame. True. But you're usually all in at this point if you're going to be traditional wargaming. Role-playing games, they're a little bit more complex, a little bit more different in there. You have to, again, commit. That's not to say there's kind of some players that might not mix or match with how you feel, but the barrier of entry for board games, and this is the duality why it's good and not so good, the entry point is what? $50, $40, even a very expensive game, $100. I mean, $100 is a lot of money, yes, but you don't have to paint. You don't have to assemble stuff. You just jump right in and play it. So it's really easy to pick this up, get some players. Many, many players have ruined games for me. And sometimes that's okay. But when I want to really immerse myself, Kingdom Death Monster, fantastic game. That's a vlog podcast on its own time. But the game itself is so amazing, it deserves to be played with amazing people. So I do tend to be very selective with who sits down to play KDM, because we're going to be putting a lot of time into our characters, into our settlement. I don't need some crazy rogue player coming in and self-destructing it and blowing it up. So if you're a solo gamer, you avoid all of that. Second, selfishly, I get to play the games I want to play. Often with the group, we'll agree ahead of time what games we're going to play, or we'll each pick 4 or 5 games or 3 or 4 games, depending on the size, bring them to game night, and when we get there, we kind of see what everyone's picked, and we'll draw one. Now, I'm up for trying any game, and certainly the gravity of the club that I belong to, we tend to like the same things. I'm kind of a Ameritrash dungeon crawler. It's not like everybody else is accounting Euro type game where we're going to stack up wood and sheep and trade cards and min-max everything on there. We all tend to be kind of action-y board gamers here, but there are some evenings where I'm happy to play a game, but I might have been feeling like something else. Solo gamer, 100% of the time, it's what I want to play. And I always, 99% of the time, play a game to its conclusion. But as a solo gamer, if I'm playing and I'm just not feeling it right now, I could pack it up. I don't have to worry about it. There's no kind of pressure there to finish things out. The next pace, and I find this the real draw of solo gaming, you play at your own pace. So I can set something up. We're looking at a picture here up on my blog. This is the Fritz gaming table. I'm making my way through Dark Souls, fighting the dancer here. I can set up the table, and as long as I lock the cat out of the room, it can stay there for days. It can stay there for weeks. I can pop in and on a Sunday afternoon, play a game for 2 or 3 hours, step away, have a crazy work week, come back on Thursday for an hour, play again. Or right before work, bang out a couple of moves, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be an intense gaming focus. I get to enjoy the hobby. I get to explore the hobby at my own pace. Likewise, if I'm committing for an afternoon, usually on a Saturday or Sunday, it's a little bit quiet, I'm going to solo a game here, I can go at my own pace. I can take my time looking at the cards. I can take my time strategizing. I can hold the dice in my hands and think about, well, what are the odds? Can I make this roll? Do I want to increase this roll? How much do I want to push my luck? And I don't have to worry that I'm killing the flow of the game, or there's kind of other people thinking about, Fritz, just roll the dice, bro. Make your move. Do something on there. The cons or the challenges to board gaming. I should also say I'm a firm believer in solo board gaming having the appropriate theme music. Naturally, when I'm playing Conan needs to be playing. But even playing something like Dark Souls or Pathfinder Rise of the Runelords, I throw on the Diablo 15th anniversary soundtrack in the back. We've got the surround sound. It helps all the good things about solo gaming to kind of bring in there. The downside. The biggest downside that I see naturally outside of the social aspects is that there's this tendency to want to potentially push the rules or change the rules or take something back, take a move back. Or if you make a mistake, it is easier to make a mistake solo gaming. Forget a rule or do something out of turn sequence, either because you're playing the entire game, maybe both sides, or you're playing 4 characters in terms of Dark Souls. You forget something, you overlook an attribute on there. I sometimes forget that one of my weapons is actually all gemmed up and jacked up on there. It's easy for that to happen, and since you're not playing with anyone else, what's the harm in going back? I find that temptation to kind of go against the very exercise of devoting the time to play a solo game. I believe that if you're in there to do the solo, it's got to be brutal. There's no backsies, there's no changies, there's no I forgot a rule and do it now. You live and die by your decisions on there. And I find that kind of lethality pushes things up, keeps you going through there, and allows you to get that experience. So in the comments now, the curiosity, solo board gaming, completely viable, new aspect of the hobby, or is it something that, okay, we acknowledge it's out there, but we're really not going to talk about it because it's not true board gaming unless you're rolling dice with a bunch of friends and a bunch of people?